So my talk this morning is entitled Seeing Things as They Really Are. And it's what I want to address is how by perceiving reality accurately without the distortions of the three poisons of cravings, aversions, and delusions, or sometimes what we call greed, hatred, and delusion, um, it can really be transformative. This Buddhist concept of seeing things as they really are, seeing the truth of things, is a profound and transformative teaching. It invites us to strip away the veils of delusion and ignorance that cloud our perception. And the problem is, we begin not even knowing what they are. When I began this practice, I did not know what I did not know. I mean, I thought the reality that I perceived was the real thing, and I, and our path offers us tools to learn about these distortions. So once I begin to wade into the teachings and whatnot, I began to look at some of that stuff, and it was pretty dramatic in terms of seeing these distortions and how prevalent they were in my life, and how I had sort of written a script unconsciously that sort of fed the ego and tried to, put the best spin on my life, even if it was not true. um, and and what these tools offer us is to look upon the true nature of reality with clarity and wisdom. We talk about clarity, we talk about wisdom, and that's really what this is about. It's about making that an essential part of our practice, seeing the impact of these distortions and these illusions in our lives. I mean, if you just think about it and think about how when you came to this, most of us come to it without any awareness that we're engaging in so much distortion. And the result of beginning to explore this stuff is that over time it helps us reduce reactivity, because we're not as defensive, we're not trying to protect the ego as much. It improves our communication. We come to our communications with more honesty, with more vulnerability. And as a result, it deepens our connection with others. It certainly reduces the stress in our lives, because having to maintain that illusion or that fiction of who we'd like to be is pretty stressful. It's a lot of work. And at the end of the day, all of that serves to lessen our suffering. Too often, without doing this work, our minds get caught up in this whirlwind of thoughts and judgments and emotions and reactivity. We project our own fears and desires and biases onto the world around us without even being aware that that's what we're doing. I mean, it just unconsciously it becomes the filter through which we experience the world. And it distorts our understanding of what is real in the world. So we cling to impermanent things as if they were eternal, as if they're not impermanent. We run from discomfort as if we could actually avoid it, if we just distract ourselves enough. In doing this, we create suffering for ourselves and for those around us. So the entry point of this work is that we understand the three characteristics of existence that the Buddha taught. The first one being impermanence, anicca in Pali. The second one being unsatisfactoriness, or dukkha in Pali. And the third, non-self, or anatta in Pali. And these are the tools which help us gain insight into the true nature of all phenomena. And this is not an intellectual understanding. It is beyond just an intellectual understanding. Our minds, our intellects get in the way sometimes of seeing things clearly. So let's dig a little deeper into each of these in terms of how this whole process works. So regarding impermanence, the Buddha taught all conditioned phenomenon, meaning basically everything, including mind and body, are in a constant state of flux and change. Nothing remains static or retains an immutable essence. Nothing lasts forever. Everything is in flux. The second, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. Suffering arises from clinging to those impermanent things, trying to make them permanent, and expecting by doing so that we will have lasting happiness. And this clinging leads to disappointment and suffering because things inevitably change. I mean, things don't stay the same, and then we suffer because something changes that we thought was should be or would could be permanent. And then thirdly, non-self, and we've talked about this recently, nothing can be regarded as a permanent independent self or soul. The self is this conventional label that we create for an ever-changing stream of physical and mental processes that have no fixed essence. You know, we're always evolving, changing, experiencing different moods, different sensations. We're not a firm, fixed entity. So we use these tools to see things as they truly are because they help us cultivate wisdom about how the world is and how we are in that world. And this wisdom helps us penetrate these habitual perceptions that are created by the greed, hatred, and delusion, by the three poisons. Now, that's an important point. When we gain wisdom, we penetrate these habitual perceptions that are the result of the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion. So this involves directly seeing and directly acknowledging and directly leaning into the impermanent, the unsatisfactory, and the selfless nature of all phenomena, free of these conceptual distortions that we're inclined to bring to them. This gets a little esoteric, but it's really important because through our practice, we cultivate awareness of present moment experience without judgment, without craving, without holding on, without pushing away. And these insights into the three characteristics help deepen this understanding. And that in turn helps us gain clear perception of reality. We begin to see things as they truly are. So, what the Buddha really taught was a different way of seeing the world than our habitual minds are inclined to do. He says there's another way to do it, to move out of that habitual way of thinking and behaving, which causes us so much suffering. He says that by practicing our mindfulness, by cultivating insight and wisdom, we learn to see things as they truly are, as they actually are, free from these distortions that our minds want to create. We observe the ever-changing, ephemeral nature of all phenomena. We recognize and accept that nothing lasts forever. Acceptance is important, that nothing lasts forever. You know, Anne's knee is not going to hurt forever. She's going to be driving in the next few weeks. We're just going to put that out there. We and also asks us and encourages us to observe, to experience both the joys and sorrows of life without becoming attached to the joys or adverse to the sorrows. It's just part of the flow. It's just part of the waves of change that we talked about a week or so ago. And then we can rest in the spacious awareness that underlies all experience. That spaciousness, which says, you know, it's bigger than our ego would suggest. And we see things as they are, but this doesn't mean adopting a cold, dispassionate, detached view of the world. People often think that those of us on this path, are cold and dispassionate and detached. Not so. To the contrary, we're more fully engaged with life. We're more fully engaged from an authentic stance. Because when we see things more clearly, we see the interconnectedness of things, we see the impermanence of things. It helps cultivate compassion because we understand the flux of nature, we understand the flow of things. We're moved to act with greater wisdom and skill because we know that our actions have consequences that ripple out like a rock in a pond in all different directions. And I would argue, and I think this was the Buddha's point, that seeing things as they are, not as we want them to be, is the real doorway to freedom. I mean, there is so much freedom in not having to carry around and maintain all that distorted thinking. It is exhausting. I live so much of my life that way. I can tell you it is exhausting. You may know that because we're always having to maintain the illusions, hold up the mask, keep the mask on. So by breaking free of the illusions that bind us, we discover greater peace, greater clarity, and deeper connection with others and with the world around us. To use another metaphor, we drop the veil from our eyes. We live with greater ease and happiness, even amidst the inevitable changes and impermanence of life. We go with the flow. So we want to practice diligently with curiosity and care, but with an openness. We talked about beginner's mind the other day. We want to have that, as few preconceptions as we can shed. We want to look deeply into the nature of our own minds and the world around us. And then we can celebrate the gift of this life with all its beauty, with all its heartache, with all its joy and all its sorrow. And by doing so, we come home to ourselves and this mystery of existence. We're not going to have all the answers. There are belief systems which says, "Oh, I'll give you the answers, I'll explain it." Well, it's just more illusion, more delusion. So the practical ways of doing this, just to sort of get into the nuts and bolts, is, it starts with our sitting practice. We sit quietly, we focus on the present moment, we come back to the present moment, we focus on our breath, on the sounds, on the bodily sensations. This brings us into ourselves and takes us away from the outside world. And when we do this, we notice how things constantly arise and pass away. Thoughts arise and pass away, sensations arise and pass away. We see there's no permanent self because there's this constant flow as we sit quiet. We directly experience impermanence. Secondly, we observe our thoughts and emotions. We notice how they arise and dissolve without control. They just come and go. We just go with the flow again. We don't view these passing phenomena as me or mine. We don't see it as a fixed entity. We see the flow that arises within. We observe, we contemplate impermanence. We see changes in seasons, aging of objects, aging of ourselves, the weather changes, we change, everything around us change. We reflect on the decay and dissolution of things. We accept that. And we let go of preconceptions. We try to suspend judgment. We try to let go of fixed opinions and assumptions. And as I said, and we talked about on Wednesday, we look at objects, people, and situations with don't know mind. I'm just open to whatever's coming at me. We investigate the nature of our experience, moment to moment, sights, sounds, sensations, and thoughts. We're going to talk on Wednesday about a sensation as sort of the door into our practice, as opposed to starting with the mind. We start with the sensory world. We cultivate equanimity. This means we accept things as they are without craving for them to be different. That is so big in this practice. We allow phenomenon to arise and pass without clinging or aversion. So these steps are the practices that guides us to see things as they are, not as we wish them to be. And this is really the essence of our practice. Seeing things as they are is profound. It is transformative. And it involves recognizing the impermanent, the unsatisfactory, and the non-self characteristics of life. And the result is reduced suffering, attainment of wisdom, and greater freedom. So that's my argument for seeing things as they really are. That was the Buddha's argument for seeing things as they really are. So let me stop and get some thoughts from you on this.